Welcome to the Data Coffee Break podcast. I'm Marc.
And I'm Christian.
If you are passionate about data like us, take a seat, relax, and join us to our coffee break where we discuss all things data.
And remember, there are no filters, no PR.
It's just a real life experience. So let's begin. Sadly for the audience, they can't see the background, but we're making a competition right now on who has the best background between you, Christian. You have two guitars on my side. On the other side of the wall, I have one bike hanging, and our guest today has two bikes hanging in his room as well. So this is a big competition.
Yeah. I have another three in another room right here. So
you have three in the other room. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Christian, who is this guest who is like a pure cyclist?
I know. I'm definitely not winning who is the fittest in the competition here. But it's good. And actually, without further ado, let me introduce our guest today, because today we have a very, very special guest with experience as a startup founder, technical and operation lead with more than 20 years of experience. So, as I mentioned, he has worked for many successful startups in different roles as a founder, operational leader, technical lead, and most recently as a startup mentor. He also has worked as a pre-sales solution engineer, customer engineer, solution architect, and tech evangelist for companies like Click, Redgate, Google Cloud, Couchbase, among others. He holds a master's degree in engineering from the Politecnico di Milano, an executive master's in business administration from the Quantico School of Business and Technology. He also is constantly training for a triathlon.
That's triathlon. There you go.
That's the race of the bikes. Cooking, playing the guitar, and spending time with his two beautiful kids. And with us today, we have Andrea Vasco. Welcome.
Hello, guys.
I think you're officially the longest introduction in this podcast so far. Right. You do more than Marc and I combined,
Well, it does seem that you're doing a lot of extracurricular activities, which is impressive for a father, to be honest.
Yeah, this is how my wife and I met. I got into triathlon because after university, I really needed a challenge where the ultimate outcome was just on me. And I was also coming out from a very long relationship with a girl that he went just down crashing and burning. And so I decided, okay, you know what? Making an Ironman and making triathlon could be a good starting point for a new me. And bear in mind, I had never ran before in my life. I swam a bit, I cycled a bit, but never. I loved cycling. My parents they didn't really like cycling, so they never quite bought me a bike. So the first thing that I did with my first wage for salary, I bought a bike and I started running. And, I was just into triathlon. And then
Nice.
my wife and I, my wife was training as well. And we just met running. And that was 14, 15 years ago. And we kept on running together ever since.
That's a great story. I think it's quite interesting that you say okay, so let's do a triathlon. Most people like me will say, oh, I'll do a 10K or at much a marathon, right? So it's very impressive.
But at the end of the day, my reasoning back then, and that helped me a lot also, in the startups was, most of the time you hear people complaining that they cannot pursue anything in life because of others, right? Their job or their parents, their bosses, society in general. And so I said, you know what? I want to do something that everybody believes it's not reachable by me. It's something absolutely out of my league. And I'm going to prove them wrong, because at the end of the day, unless I crash or unless, I just, end up in the hospital, deciding to get to the finish line, it's only on me. And, surprisingly enough, I really unlocked something in my brain. I also became a national champion one year.
Wow.
Because I was really into it, right? And but that was, I was starting my career in the real world, in the real job. So I had more time than what I had as I progressed. So I had to take it easier and easier and easier. But that was really good, right? It's a very liberating thought when you say you can do anything if you just remove all the clutter, right? And you just concentrate on what you can do. And, if you're not in a position to accomplish something, well, at least you're not in the position, right? And you can move forward to something else.
Concentrate on what you can do, and I guess what do you like in life, which is personal and professional. As Christian was introducing you, he said like you're a startup mentor. I'm very curious to understand what does that mean, being a startup mentor?
Yeah, so as a mentor, you offer expertise on a number of areas where you believe you can, you can say something valuable. In my case, scaling teams, of course, technology and things like that. And most of the time, you would just either go to events or be paired with other founders, right? That they are looking for either validation of their own ideas, or they are looking for guidance. I'll give an example. Recently, I also joined forces in a way, right, with very early startups in Sweden. However, what they do is they have this amazing founder that knows everything about the business, the application, the app works into, which is essentially a training app for young footballers. But he had no idea whatsoever about the technology, right? And he reached out to me to say, I need to launch this app and I'm desperately in need of a CTO. And I said to him, you know what, I can give you some pro bono help. Like, if I need you to tell you, do this, do that, or, the developers are screwing you up, things like that. We helped this company launch. And now we survived the launch. It's great because, it's getting more and more traction. But these are the kind of things that you do as a mentor. Then, as many things in life, right? Each and every mentor has different styles, looking for many different things.
Yeah.
If I have to be absolutely honest with you guys, that I love being a mentor for two main reasons. First, you can have an understanding of what's on the edge of technology, right? Because most of the startups are really dealing with stuff that it's not really consumer, like, widely adopted by consumers yet. But the other thing that is even more exciting to me, if I may, is that leadership in very large organizations, most of the time, right, are very, very good at managing. They have a great experience at scaling team, but maybe they do not have that really deep expertise and knowledge of the craft of what their company is doing, right? And in the case of a startup, most of the time it's the opposite, right? You have these amazing founders at the very beginning of their journey. They are really craving and know everything about their craft, right? Or at least those that succeed, right? They know everything about their craft. And it's amazing, right? To really have an idea of, you can look after a title or you can look after an outcome, right? Many people say, oh, I want to be the CEO because being a CEO is great. Yeah, you can be a CEO if you want, right? Just incorporate a company, you're going to be a CEO. Great. Now you have the title.
Yeah.
But what you're after, probably, right? It's accomplishing something. And that's the kind of spirit that I love about startups, right? It's really that, titles kind of fade away most of the time. And if the conversation is on, okay, how do we do this, right? How do we create an MVP? How do we create something that may survive the initial launch and then we scale it up? Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Very long answer, but that's fascinating. I love when you mention like the difference between being in leadership in a large organization compared to being a founder, and how difficult it could be for those founders to switch to pass those different stages of growth in an organization as they're basically startup growth.
Yeah. And you're already a mentor, right? So which means that you have the experience, because to be a mentor, you went through all of these processes. And for people that are listening to us and would like to know your experience, can you tell us about your journey, when you were having your startup and what were the challenges back then?
Yeah, the answer will surprise you because I can mention two examples, right? And the very first company that I owned and founded had nothing really to do with technology. It had to do with sports. And the idea was with triathlon.
We see the passion coming back.
Yeah, we didn't have an Ironman in Italy, right? And we didn't have a race of a circuit called the ITU, which is essentially the World Cup.
Okay.
And since Italy, it's probably one of the best countries in the world where you can practice triathlon because it's really, we have so much coastline, so many mountains. We said, well, probably we should create a company to organize sports events. And none of us had any experience. And yeah, we rolled with that a couple of years. And then we just moved forward with something else in life. Because, we kind of realized that, yeah, it was a great experience, but probably was not what we were after in life. Let's put it this way. And in that company, I was leading operations. And to be honest with you, the most challenging thing that I ever done in my life, it probably happened in that company, because as head of operations, I was also responsible for coordinating the volunteers. And when you run a sports event, volunteers have everything because are the face of your event. If they are rude to anybody, right, of the civilians, of course, your event will have a reputation hit. And they work for free, so you don't really have any leverage on them. So it's really on you to inspire them to show up on the day of the event, rain or sunshine. I was responsible eventually for a little bit more than around 1,000 volunteers for an event, which is a huge number. And I remember working my butt off to prepare lunch bags for them, to make sure that they had everything they needed to thrive. And, at the end of the day, that was really a good lesson for me, right? In how to show people that you can be a leader, not because you scream loud enough that you're a leader, but you really want to show them the way. The other startup is in my American adventure. And long story short, a former professor of mine at the university essentially had this intuition at the beginning of the internet revolution in Italy to create a consulting company that would just specialize into a few things related to IT and performance evaluation. So those companies, you can think of big companies, and they were in desperate need of having somebody that could help them understanding, are they running the hardware as the best they can? Are they planning for the capacity in the best way? And we came up with the product for capacity planning. So essentially data warehouse that from one side would just run ETL for servers, databases, everything on the technology stack. On the other hand, would just consume information like how many messages we are managing, how many users we are supporting, how many orders we are managing over our e-commerce website. Let's use the queuing network theory and modeling to create, some sort of predictions on, you tell me how much business you have to run, and I will tell you how many IT resources you have to run. Eventually, we created a product that would do that, and we were identified by Gartner as leaders. And the biggest companies in the world in that area, right, couldn't really stand that a company of, back then we were 70, 80 Italian engineers were the best in the market. One of them, BMC Software, decided to acquire our product and rebrand it, but we sold them the product, but not the professional services and the expertise. So for us, was the opportunity to become the golden partner for one of the biggest companies in the world. And that gave me the opportunity to essentially help BNC scaling up their practice in teaching and helping their teams understanding how do we do pre-sales of this stuff, how do we run projects of this stuff, how do we do training, how do we position in the market this stuff. And I did it for 1 year in London, where I just covered a few of the key accounts and scaled them up. I did the same in Moscow for 1 year, and since we were doing pretty okay, we had this feeling that we could really play a big role in the US. And so I was offered to essentially join a new office, a complete new branch on the other side of the world in Boston, and essentially scale the company from an operations perspective. I was employee number 2. In the beginning, we were working from Starbucks. We had nothing at all. We didn't want to get into any debt with any VC or anything like that. So we had, our mission was to make ends meet one way or another. And after 7 years over there, I ended up being the manager, the head of operations. But again, titles mean relatively nothing to me, to be honest with you. But what is important is that eventually we had operations in 3 cities, so Boston, New York, and LA, and San Francisco as well, right? Because we had also had a small office in San Francisco. I had the opportunity to engage with the biggest companies in the world, and that was amazing. And eventually I had, depending on how many interns we would just hire, I was responsible for a team between 15 and 20 people, which was really good. Those were happy days. And, then eventually everything somehow faded away for a couple of reasons. First, I really wanted to come back to Europe. I became a father, and my parents were very old already, and I felt like, forcing them to come to Boston to see the grandchildren was probably a little bit too much of a stretch. At the end of the day, the other thing is that I felt like I wanted the company to go in one direction, but the rest of the company wanted to go in another direction, right? And I didn't want to become the problem in a company that I loved so much. And so I said, okay, I don't want to be the problem, and so I will be the solution. I'm just going to leave. When I decided to move from a leadership position in the US and I wanted to come back to Europe, the vast majority of the headhunters asked me, "Are you crazy?" And that made me giggle, because those were the same "Are you crazy?" that I heard when I said to my friends, "I want to do an Ironman." Right? "Oh, you're gonna get killed." "No, I'm gonna pull it off." It just everything it takes is just one yes. I mean, I've been an individual contributor for a while, and for me, it was really on. I've been in responsibility positions for a long time, right? With my initial startups and then with the company in Boston. And I felt like I wanted to see how the big boys, right? People with more experience than me, with gray hair that I have as well, but I mean, back then I didn't have, right? I wanted to see, okay, how do they manage certain situations, and how would I compare myself to them? And, that was a very good learning experience for me, because eventually that also led me to take the decision to run an MBA, right? In the beginning, I thought, "Oh, I don't need an MBA. I'm an engineer. I can do anything." And I said, no, you're wrong, right? You can always learn something. And so during the pandemic, I mean, it was a rough moment for me. My father died, and my mother almost died as well for COVID. And, we were all stuck at home. And I said to my wife, "You know what? I can't let this year go with just pain. I need to get something good out of this year. So let's do a freaking MBA." And we did it together.
On the top of doing your day job and having kids. This is impressive. One thing incredible, and I mean, you got the headhunter saying like, "Are you crazy?" from coming back from the US in this case. So you have a fantastic experience, which is you've been able to work in EMEA region as well as America. So that's two quite prominent regions. What do you see as major differences for startups, in particular, potentially ways opportunities arise for them, or difficulties that they could face, as those two markets have pretty big differences, we'll say?
For sure. The biggest difference probably is on sizes, right, of the companies. Of course, a startup in the US, it's probably a mid-sized company in Europe or in Italy, right? And I remember I was in Boston, and we were daydreaming about creating a new product. And but Boston, it's a pretty amazing city, because you have Harvard, you have the MIT. And I remember that essentially we ended up also having a brief chat with the founder of Data Robot. And back then, the company was a startup. It was really an early stage startup of 10, 20 people, but it also made me giggle, because eventually it kept being a startup even when they were 300, 400, 500 people. That's what their status. Things are changing a lot, at least in Italy, from what I see, right? There is definitely a startup vibe in the US of people that are serial entrepreneurs in a way. So they really create their babies in order to sell them, to have an exit and move on to the next. Where probably in Europe, or at least in Italy, we were more used to, you create your own company and your company is there to stay, right? Things are changing now, of course, right? But if I can tell you something, a revelation that I had by engaging with people in the US, in Russia, in Europe. I also engage with Australia, of course, South Africa, and China, and India, of course, as such a massive player in what we do. Is that eventually, I mean, everybody can manifest in different ways, but eventually all of us are just trying to be happy. Right? That's my, and that's
I like this approach.
Not really, because it's true. Yeah. It's true, right? And this is how I try. I mean, maybe Christian would say, no, it's not true, but this is how I try to approach with people, to say, let's try to be happy first.
That's
right?
true.
Because that's
true.
what we want. Yeah. And then once we are, we just have a common ground. We want to be happy. We're not here to rub each other, just to be in a fist fight on who has the most accomplishment. Just try to be happy. Then let's try to work out how we can do something special. And with most people will work.
Actually, going from there, I can consider myself a person that was more involved into or started learning about startups in just after I came to the UK, right? Because in the UK, we see a lot of startups. It's a startup hub. And then we see this concept of unicorn. And I would like to get your point of view. First of all, in your experience, what is a unicorn, right? Starting from there. Because some companies will say, oh, that's the next unicorn. And then we see that they weren't, and so on. So because for a lot of people, as you mentioned, they want to be happy. But a lot of people, they are very obsessed with being successful at the same time, right? Because maybe that's the connection that they have.
Yeah. What people sometimes obsess is to be socially acceptable, right? It's the paradigm that you have now, that you have to read a book a week, you have to run 5 miles, you have to do all these kind of things to make sure that you project an image of yourself, that you are a good citizen and you are, an absolute badass kind of professional, right? And so what is a unicorn? Well, I mean, ideally, unicorn should be that company that just disrupts the market, right? I mean, it used to be the $1 billion company, but now everybody can be a billionaire, right? So it's the next $1 trillion company. And, the financial definition probably is not the most accurate, but yeah, the idea is that it's really that company, right, that establishes a new standard into an industry. So what it could be Facebook, could have been Facebook, or what Apple did, what Google did as well, what Salesforce did as well, Then it's absolutely true that now everybody's is quite hysterical in trying to find these unicorns. You must have heard of FTX, right? And that story, to me, it's really the point of no return, because I mean, people were so hysterical in making sure, FTX is going to be the thing for crypto, right? I mean, what happened? It's incredible. It's even really scary, because it's like, I had the feeling that what happened was like you having, an open-hearted surgery performed by a drunken individual with no kind of medical record, right, or medical expertise. Because I mean, what they did goes against a number of laws, a number of practices, even things that, as an investor, you should make sure do not happen. And so this is why I mean, what is the unicorn? Unicorn at the moment, it's more of a word, and
it's a nice hashtag to have, a tag to have for those companies to show you on your profile on LinkedIn, I guess.
Oh, I'm the next unicorn. Probably true, probably not. But eventually, right, I can't help but thinking that sometimes there is this obsession of the hyper growth, right, that needs to happen to maximize the return on investment, and and just make sure that you perform the absolute best ROI in the least possible time, and companies would die for it, right? And again, FTX can be an example of it, right? A company consumed by its own success. And on the other side, I'm just wondering, okay, I mean, how many unicorns could we create if we found a way also to take it easier, if you will? And I'm not sure how you can do that. But on the other end, I can't help but thinking that some of the real disruptions that we had in mankind, think about going to the moon. I mean, those were kind of endeavors that no VC would ever taken, I believe, because those were endeavors that were just playing crazy, right? Do something that nobody has done before. We don't even know if it's possible, if there is that technology, and do that in 10 years. But they pulled it off, and was that a unicorn? Yes, it was. I mean, to me, yes, it was.
From a different perspective, And I do remember listening a podcast speaking about, there is those unicorns where in the podcast they were defining those one as $1 billion in terms of valuation, but they were explaining about all those startups who didn't fail, who provide great products and great services and great value for their clients. They're not $1 billion company in terms of valuation, but they're growing. They are like successful. And the point of the podcast was like, we speak about unicorns, but like, what about this other one? They are successful. They're providing great results as well. So we should temper a bit of expectation about like only unicorns and everything else is for garbage.
That's true. That's true.
Means that because we're talking about here more around, I would say, perception. Like what is the perception between real value?
Oh, to pitch basically the company and get funding, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
There is no product.
Because one of the things that sometimes I see is that a lot of startups also rely a lot on marketing, right? That perception that we all are now are talking about ChatGPT everywhere, right? But does that mean that also this marketing, the way that you perceive or that you position yourself in the market is going to tell how good you're going to do on it? Meaning that only the companies or the startups with the best marketing are going to win? Or what is your view on that? Especially because, as you mentioned, you are more of a old school. So that would be really interesting to see your point there.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, I believe that from a sales perspective, right, and a marketing perspective, the ultimate goal of a company is owning a concept or a word in the minds of the customer base, right? And if you do that, then you have won. The thing is, I believe marketing is, of course, important, and can give you an edge, right? There are, of course, areas of the human decision making, right, that it's not completely data-driven. We could talk about that a lot, right? But we take some decisions because they make us feel good, and that's fine. And marketing, of course, taps into them. On the other hand, though, right, I never quite blame companies to try to get away with it. Because, I mean, sometimes it's easy, right? Because in a way, I believe all of us, we try to get away with something, right? Of course, not all our sins can be comparable, right? Maybe I don't get away, leaving a hole of a few $1 billion, but eventually that's also not, another natural thing, right? To take the least friction path if nobody's really watching, right? And that's a tendency. What I would like to see, I mean, my dream, my hope would be that the consumer base could become a little bit more critical. And that goes with education, it goes with knowledge. That goes with making sure that consumers kind of feel responsible to understand what they're after, to try to make a better informed decision on and not just based on, of course, it's good for marketing to try to own a word in our minds. It's even better when, the facts confirm that, that's a great product indeed. And, they have every right to say what they
not
say.
Just based on hype, basically.
Yeah, because, I mean, otherwise, it's also sad, right? You have a number of companies that are saying the same thing over and over and over again, right? So they kind of blend each other. And, I mean, sometimes I look even at websites of software products and I can't even understand what they do. I'm just hit with buzzwords, and I understand that my life is going to be beautiful, right? And I'm going to have long blonde hair and beautiful blue eyes, and I'm going to, just walk over riding a white horse over a beautiful beach and things like that. But I don't understand what the actual product is doing, right? And the risk that I feel is that eventually everybody will become more cynic.
What could be some of the challenges that data and AR startups are facing at the moment? I'm seeing a lot of opportunities, but to be honest, but I know there is some massive challenges they could face as well.
Yeah, to me, the most common error actually was well summarized by a colleague of ours. She came up with something called decision intelligence engineering. It's essentially put your brain at ease and understand, can you really do a data-driven decision, which is not just confirming your delusions, right? But it's really going after hypothesis testing and things like that.
Scientific approach, basically.
Yeah, right. And it's not just science, but it's also behavioral science. It's also study of how the brain works, decision science, and things like that. It's all blended together. And of course, AI plays a big role, right, in data decision making. And what she said, and it was really an epiphany for me, was that many companies today are trying to hire data scientists to have them create new machine learning models. And this is probably not the best approach. And what she said, right, the way she put this together, It's very compelling. It's like, let's assume you have a restaurant, right? And of course, the first thing you have to do is hiring a chef, because the chef is going to create the dishes for you. The chef is going to look after ovens, dishwashers, and things like that. But do you think that the chef, when a chef buys an oven, knows everything about the schematics of the oven? No, he knows what the oven is good for. And that's what you should do for AI and machine learning. If you are a startup, right, and your business is not creating new models or doing research, this kind of research. There are many, many companies out there, right, that are doing already this work for you, even better, right? Even better than you. So there is no point for you of spending enormous amount of money putting together even the most massive Kubernetes clusters. Try to create some scripts in Python that are stitched together from stuff that you get from ChatGPT or Stack Overflow, and pray God that it stays together. Start easier, right? And this is really the difference between research and research in machine learning and applied machine learning, right? If you're a startup, likely you want to apply machine learning. And that changes everything, right? Of course, you need to understand, what is a regression, what is clustering, what is, a deep neural network. But you don't really have to understand how to design that in depth, if you will. You should better understand your business and understanding how do I link my business to the opportunity that AI gives to me, right? And how many times you would talk to people and say, oh, yeah, I don't know anything about the business because my job is data scientist. And this is wrong, especially if you're in a startup. This is wrong. You can't do that. You can't do that. As much as we ask to the business to have an appreciation of technology must have an appreciation of the business. At least this is what I think, right? I firmly believe that everybody in the company should at least know what's the mission of the company, the value statement. In a previous life, right, during a training, I would just ask openly to people, what's the mission of your company? And you would be shocked how many people, they had no idea. And, you're giving a company 8 hours of your life, at least every day. And you're just here to push buttons. There's so much more you could do.
Yeah, so actually that makes sense. And to be honest, during today's conversation, you've been giving quite great advice to everyone on the audience. I mean, with your experience, do you have I don't know, like a recipe of what makes a successful startup in data, or what do you see like this is going to success, right? And again, just to make it very clear, success can mean a lot of things, right? Not necessarily like the next unicorn, right?
Provided the fact that you cover the fundamentals. So you have a product that has a market, right? And you can bring it to the market. It's achievable. From one side, it's a matter of culture, of team. And, what you just said, Christian, is very true, right? What are the people trying to get out of this endeavor, right? What does success look like? There must be unity on that front. The other thing, which I believe is critical, from a cultural perspective, there must be this level of trust, of course, and this level, even from leadership, to lead and not impose, and that's really, really, really important, right? And mentor and grow and make sure that people feels connected, right, to what the company is doing. On the other hand, though, if I were to run a startup today, it's critical to create fast prototypes. So to fail fast, to create fast, as fast as possible. And you have an idea, you have amazing ways to create a prototype of an idea as fast as possible. I would say don't be lured or don't be fooled by what you would like to be the right solution. Don't fall in love with the technology, fall in love with the outcome. That's the thing, right? So don't use a product because you always wanted to use the product.
Being close to the clients and users.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, if you have to run a model and the best solution to run a model is on a cloud provider, do that. Especially if you are in such an early stage where you don't really know what is going to matter and how the use case is going to evolve.
So that's incredible, because there is at the end, from what you say, create fast, fail fast, which is, if I'm correct, the mantra of Facebook it's its origin, basically. And it's actually such a good environment now to create a startup, let's say in the data, AI, ML space, because all the building blocks as we were describing before are here for you to be successful, literally.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is probably starting with something achievable, and don't shoot for the moon in the beginning. Of course, point at the moon, right? But success is steps day by day by day, right? Start with something simple, master it, move forward. Boom, 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 boom. That's how you run a marathon.
And it's the same way. I was reading an article about the learning curve for anyone learning something new. It can be around data, it can be around, I don't know, we were speaking about triathlon at the beginning, and there's this S-shaped learning curve, which is at the beginning is going to be difficult. You're going to need to put more energy, but when time goes by, you get to this kind of midpoint where it's easy for the time you spend to learn. And from a management perspective, this article was related to managing your team. There is the importance of like making sure to help those individuals once they get quite further ahead in this S learning curve to go for another topic, another project to learn something new. And it's in the same aspect here. I would say like with a startup, it's going to be difficult at the beginning, but as long as you do those baby steps, you put the time and effort, it's going to become easier. And I take from that as well, like listen from the users, from the audience in this case, to be successful as well.
Now, Mark, you got me thinking. It's also very, very important to kind of recognize, right, what kind of mission you're into. And the example that you just popped into my mind while you were talking is, we hear more and more people today that are, I just bragging on, I climbed Mount Everest, or I climbed to these very big mountains. I'm from the mountains. So this is something that resonates with me. I say, okay, you climb these big mountains. And, what I find funny when these people are bragging about going to Mount Everest is that in my mountains in the Alps, in pretty much all the refuges that we have at the top, there is this motto that when you get on top, they say, you don't climb the mountains for the others to see you, but you climb the mountains to show others what is beyond the mountain, right? Yeah. So it's not about to say, oh, I'm here, I'm big, right? Yeah. No, this is just, a way to I mean, it's an attention craving kind of things, which I get it, we all have it, but that's not why you do stuff. You should be doing stuff. You should be doing stuff to propel forward, right? And that's the missing sometimes that happens. Okay, we're doing all of this. We're having a lot of fun. We're snapping a lot of pictures, right? These most amazing LinkedIn posts, but what are we accomplishing really?
Beyond that, what's the point? Why?
I'm conscious that you're quite a busy person, Andrea, and thank you so much for all those insights. We have one question that we ask to all of our guests. The question is, what is the single most important professional piece of advice you have ever received? So
this friend of mine, he used to work at Ernst & Young in New York, right? And in the very beginning of my life, when I had started for triathlon, then I had the chance to move to America. And, I felt like a feather in the wind. And I asked him, well, I mean, should I go? Should I stay here, right? And because, especially when you move, right? Christian, you moved, I'm not sure about you, Mark, right? But some of the people close to you are just throwing stuff at you, right? To say, why are you moving, right? And a lot of doubt gets into your mind. And what he shared with me was, you know what? Feel free to mess up as much as you want with your profession up to 35 years old or so. But you have to commit to figure out what you want to do by the time you are 35. But, back then, up to that moment, just feel free to experiment, to try, to fail, to roll back, and do things like that. And I took that advice, to be honest with you. A lot of people will tell you, oh, you should stay in a company at least 2 years, right? Because otherwise it looks bad on your resume. But at the end of the day, I also had the opportunity to leave companies after 8 months because, I realized I'm not making good use of my time. So, that advice came back to me, say, the deadline is approaching. So you don't have
time is valuable. Time is valuable. In this case.
Yeah. Really
and
good.
It's good because now that I have kids, it's I feel like I'm in a better place and I'm more relaxed than other people that maybe didn't take the same amount of risks that I took. And so, yeah, to me, it was good advice.
That's really good. Thank you. And with that, I mean, where can people follow you? I mean, I didn't mention at the beginning, but you are one of the best public speakers I've ever seen on stage. I'm not joking here. But for those that don't see you on stage, where can they follow?
So I would say on LinkedIn, people can see some of the shenanigans that I can just share. On top of that, yeah, I thought about creating maybe some YouTube channel, but we shall see. We shall see about that.
Nice. Yeah. Okay. We'll put the link as per usual. And once again, would like to thank you a lot for your time, Andrea. I think all your insights and all your advices.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, guys.
And the best of luck for your next triathlon.
Thank you. Thank you, my friend. And you.
Thanks for listening to this episode. This podcast represents our views and not the ones of our employers.
Our mission at the Data Coffee Break podcast is to inform you and help you grow in this always changing data field.
Follow us and get into the conversation with the community on our LinkedIn page and Instagram.
See you next Tuesday, and until then, keep your data caffeinated.